The challenge that this panel is tasked with sparking a dialogue around is the challenge of digital exclusion. Before I introduce the panel, I would like to share a few numbers just to make this problem concrete for all of us here. The good thing, there is substantially positive news, and I know that we all suffer from negativity bias. We're actually wired for it, so it's not because of any fault of character or anything. We're all wired for that, for survival. But a lot of good stuff have been happening. So in the last 5 years, 1 billion people joined the digital economy, at least by gaining access to the internet, which is the foundational step towards becoming part of the digital economy. As a result of COVID, and because everything has some silver lining, many people use the internet for the first time. So in 2020, 433 million people started using the internet for the first time, precisely because of the COVID lockdowns. According to the ITU, and all these numbers comes from the International Telecommunication Union, which tracks trends in digital inclusion, now about 63% of the world population have access to the internet. This is a very good number, but it also means that more than 30% of the world population, 2.7 billion people, remain excluded. And this is the task of this panel, is to actually start a dialogue in this forum around this problem of digital exclusion. I'll first introduce briefly our panel, and I cannot do them justice, so I'll honor the guidelines that I got as a moderator and just say what they do right now. And then, of course, I invite the panel to share whatever aspect of their experience that they would like to share in order to shed light on their contribution to the digital economy. So to my right, Arvind Gupta, he is the head of and co-founder of Digital India Foundation in India. And then to his right, we have Professor Barbara Lu Diaz. She's adjunct professor in the Federal University of Pará in Brazil. And then we have to her right, Inyas Turatsinze. He is the CEO of Paying Tone Rwanda. And last but not least, we have Yukti Sharma, Senior Consultant, Deloitte, India. Without further ado, I'll turn to the panel and ask the first question. So we have so many people still excluded, 2.7 billion to be exact. The demography of this exclusion is very diverse between urban, rural, women, men, old, young, and so on. In your opinion, what do you think is the biggest barrier or the top barriers to digital inclusion? Why do we still have so many people outside of the digital economy?
Yeah, thank you, Eba. We have, you started with a very interesting number, which was 1 billion people have joined the digital economy in the last 5 years. I could easily estimate India probably has given 45 to 50% of that. So the biggest inclusion that has happened anywhere in the world has happened probably in India, and much higher above the 17% population, global population that India shares. But the reason why we realize that a lot of, we realize it's a factor of 3 or 4 things. One is literacy. 2 is the creation of the need. And as you said, COVID, the pandemic created a need, which was an external factor for people to start adopting, kids to start adopting. But we also realize that there is the communication or the literacy around the fact that it can lead to empowerment, efficiency, and a better quality of life is what has prompted, at least from an Indian experience, from an Indian lens, more people to join the bandwagon. It's just not during COVID. Out of the 450 million that probably have joined the internet or the digital economy in India over the last 5 years, 200 million probably came during the COVID 2.5 years, but 250 million came organically without COVID because of the fact of the need for efficiency, empowerment, and the fact that they needed to do certain transactions like banking, moving money, which was the easiest to do on an internet-enabled device. The last thing that I would share as an opening remark is the design of the fact how you do in digital inclusion or get people on the internet is also, very top-centric. And this is one of my very important subjects that we research. It has to be 1% of their family income. That has to be the design criteria. If it is more expensive, so if a person earns, we started with a design criteria of $1 a day earning person should be able to afford the internet. That $1 a day means $30 a month. The cost of the internet to that person should not be more than the 1% to 2% to do basic internet services. And that's something that we have achieved. At a family level, today internet costs about $2 a month for unlimited internet, and that is something that has broken the global standards of the lowest cost internet and has really enabled people to join the empowerment that digital economy provides. So I think that has to be one design criteria. More and more countries we go to, we hear this, that the internet is there, you can join it, but both the instrument, which is the car, and the fact that you need to know how to drive it, and the cost of running that car, which is the internet cost, the mobile data cost, is very expensive, it's prohibitive expensive. So all of these factors contribute to that.
Thank you, Arvind. So basically what you're saying is that the first barrier is lack of need to join the digital economy?
Creation of the need, yes.
Yeah, and the second barrier is the cost of data and the cost of internet connectivity. So Barbara, what do you think? What do you think is the barrier from where you sit in Brazil?
Thank you, Eva. And good afternoon. I need you pay attention because my first language is not English and I didn't sleep well. And I need you pay attention with me. I would like to thank URF and say that I feel very honored to be such a prestigious panel with such talented people. And I believe that in order to make the digital economy and society more inclusive and equitable, it's fundamental that we diminish the gap that still separates how we value the work of social production, which includes reproduction labor, care, and social well-being, and the work that is considered productive. For this reason, I would like to talk about the platformization of teaching work and its genderization. Digital work presents itself to women as a means to reconcile the double or triple daily workload inside and outside their homes. The digitalization of work creates an even more precarious system of employability and job stability for women by promoting flexibility and constant adaptation. This new mode of accumulation also makes the idea of unpaid work more acceptable. In addition to increasing precarization of labor brought about by the feminization of platformization, the algorithm creates gender discrimination, especially in teaching activities. Fundamental changes have been promoted by the platformization, exposing the dangerization of work in those servers. Such changes are associated with resign, mode of time and space, especially from the modes of use of digital platforms. Ubiquity, as a social construct, is linked to the idea of omnipresence in digital culture and appears associated to the advent of hypermobility. Through such devices, subjects to move individually and collectively through different physical and digital environments in a non-stop and simultaneous mobility. The purpose is to form a new omnipresence subject in the different contexts in which he or she performs he or her activities always available for labor requests. Women are, in this sense, much more overworked than their male counterparts, as well as having to take care of most of household chores. In fact, this is the main problem. How women's work is always seen as helping, auxiliary, and not as the main job. As a result, skills and hours worked are not valued or accounted for. The digitalization of work processes has contributed to further invisibilize the time and the skills mobilized by jobs considered to be auxiliary. But the most plausible response in the face of the negative consequences of technology for women's works, in my opinion, is not condemn, especially the machines, but to strengthen labor, so that it can challenge the course of technology movement under more favorable conditions for women labor. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. So what you raise a very important point, which is, the gender aspect of exclusion. Right? And that basically for women to be able to join the digital economy has to be designed in a way that accommodates their circumstances as social workers, caretakers, and productive roles in the family. But also before we started the session, we were talking outside, and I asked you about connectivity in where you live in Brazil. And you shared some very interesting, especially on the point that Arvind raised regarding the cost of connectivity and the cost of data. Can you share a little bit of that conversation with the...
Yes, I live in Belém, from Pará. It's a city of north of Brazil. It's a very poor and equal city. Especially in my work as a teacher, I observe that the great majority of my students do not have access to the internet. The costs are very high, and the internet doesn't work, and it's terrible for education and for included digitalization. Thank you.
Thank you. And Barbara said that her region provides Brazil with electricity, with water, and yet the cost of electricity and water in her region is higher than in the rest of Brazil. Yes. So this kind of sort of... famous. A woman. So, Ines, what do you think is the top barrier from where you sit, from the private sector and from the startup perspective?
Thank you very much. The biggest barrier, especially in developing countries, we will say, if you want to achieve economic inclusion at scale, we need the population to be financially available on the grid, which is one of the more recurring problem that a lot of innovative solution meets when they want to solve a particular need. And the lack of financial footprint on the grid is mainly due to three problems. The first one is literacy. We all know how, to open a bank account. It's even hectic. You read the terms and conditions, even if it's in your own language. The language is lawyerish. It's a word that you can't, describe and you don't really understand. And the literacy, we are getting there as developing countries, but we are not there yet. I would say now we have more than 40% in Rwanda is made of people who are under 3 years of age, which is great. The education up to secondary school is amazing, close to 100%. And we believe this is something that it's a matter of time that it's solved, but we are still facing this particular problem. And then the elephant in the room, of course, it's the cost. We all know how the Western civilization, there is this trend that they love to brag about how their life is expensive, right? But in this sub-Saharan Africa, we like to brag how much I saved in bargaining. So I can even visit the shop to just have the opportunity to bargain, because it's a sport we love so much. And so the cost is, sometimes it's unrealistic if you take into account what is the minimum income per an average household. And then if you compute that with the costs of this amazing solution of the problem that I have, sometimes it's unacceptable. We have some major macroeconomic trends that, of course, can help us move in the right direction, like we had COVID. You could see that a lot of people, especially in the formal employment, who have the money on the card, they wouldn't be able to spend that when they're home. So the only alternative was to withdraw the money in cash. And then now some other major players in the microtransactions sensed the opportunity over there, and then they took the cost down, and then it drove the transaction volume on mobile money on the roof. And right now, the majority of the transactions that happens in Rwanda, the report says that they're above 63%. And this is amazing, and we thank that to an unfortunate event like COVID. And the last one, which affect the financial footprint and availability, we will say about the infrastructure. It's super expensive and it's super inaccessible. So to put things in context, when we started Payington, which is a consumer micro lending for low-income generating individuals, initially the ideal way of when we were designing this product was to create an e-commerce that sells on credit, specifically on credit, right? In theory, it was amazing. Low cost of customer acquisition, low cost of production, etc. But we came only to realize that only less than 10% of Rwandans actually buy online. People have to interact with, store. And why is that? It's because these online marketplaces are not available to the usual micro trader, to the people who buy from, on a daily basis. And couple it, they don't want to accept transaction online. Why? Because there is a 2, 3, 4%. And these people, they have a margin of between 5 and 7%. So they're not willing to pay 50% of their net revenue, just to be able to access this infrastructure. So we will say that I would love to see, we already have technologies that are there, some that we're using, some that we're not using. I would challenge these big players to innovate around the business model instead of the technology. I think this will be more of an innovation. We already have things that we are not even using yet. And AI is coming, which is another trend. So I would love us to see using these technologies. And should we combine and address those three key challenges, we're going to have these people have a reliable financial footprint, which will without a shadow of a doubt, propel them to have access to all these amazing technologies that are available out there.
So you identified the hassle factor, the sort of literacy and digital and financial literacy gap, and also the cost of transactions, and the accessibility of some of the infrastructure for the small merchants that the last mile user tends to rely on. Thank you, Ignacy. So, Yukti, I will ask you for two things. First, you share your perspective on the main barriers, but let's go directly to the next question, which is, how did India do it? And I know that your experience lies in the health sector, so if you can take us a little bit through that. And we know India relied on an approach that is gaining momentum, which is the digital public infrastructure approach. Arvind touched on how much India contributed to the gain of 1 billion that we have seen and we detected at the global level. So if you can speak about the barriers from your perspective and also your experience with deploying health digital public infrastructure.
Okay, thank you so much, Heba. Good afternoon, everyone. This is incredible to be sitting here talking to you about India's journey to digital public infrastructure. But coming to the first question, which is, what are the barriers that we have faced? Before answering that question, I will give you two interesting statistics and talk about how we reached there, addressing barriers along the way. The first one is in January of 2023, that is this year, India saw 8.5 billion digital transactions. worth around $200 billion, including around 50 million merchants and 300 million citizens partaking in these digital transactions. Also, this was on payments. This was on sending and receiving money. Now, if we look at health, India was able to deliver 2.5 billion COVID vaccination doses in less than 2 years. Now, when we look at these numbers, obviously they are remarkable. But this is the reality of a country wherein just a few years ago, 90% of the transactions were cash-based. 85% of economic transactions are informal, they were cash-based, and now today we are looking at digital transactions, highest number of digital transactions anywhere in the country. So this is where we're today, and when I come to the barriers that we faced, I primarily think about three things. One is access, second is skills, and the third is motivation. When we come to access, Arvind also touched on access, Ignatius also touched on access. It's access to internet, access to connectivity, access to low-cost data. But there's also one more important factor that we should be looking at, which is access to user-centric services that are designed for all the user, even those users who need assistive tech. That is access. And on access, I would like to talk about few things that we did that enabled accessibility to 1.4 billion citizens. So when we talk about access, obviously access to internet is important. But even if you have access to internet, if you don't have digital skills, how are you going to engage with digital technologies? That's a question, right? Now, India is a diverse country. We have almost 100 languages spoken in the country. There are 30 states, and we say language changes every mile in the country. So it's very diverse. Now, when we started designing solutions and we wanted to digitize the payments landscape, that's when low-cost innovation, India coined a term called jugaad, which essentially means frugal innovation, that came to the fore. That's when we started designing QR codes. Today, if you come to India anytime and you step out and you want to buy groceries, you will go to a local vendor who's probably sitting on the street selling vegetables. You can not only pay her cash, but you can also make digital payments to her. How? There's just a QR code kept right next to vegetables. You scan that QR code and money will be transferred to her account. Now, in that scenario, this vendor may or may not be digitally literate. She may or may not know how to use technology in a way you and I can. But what makes it interesting is frugal innovation. How would she know that money has been transferred to her account? How would she know that, yes, this person, Yukti, has transferred 100 rupees or $10 to me in my account? That's where frugal innovation comes in. QR code was one frugal innovation. But then on top of that, what you will see very commonly in India is these local vendors will have small speakers kept right next to the QR code. So when money is transferred to her account, the speaker says, this much money has been transferred to your account. Now that's quite interesting. That is where market came up. That is where innovation happened, and this is frugal innovation. So when we talk about access, which is obviously a barrier, we should not only look at internet connectivity, but we should also look at designing systems that take into account user needs. We understand that not everyone's digital literate in the country right now, but when we talk about digital inclusion, we should also talk about digital empowerment. Digital empowerment has agency built in. Today, in the previous sessions, Anith mentioned that his mom was upset that a local vendor was only taking cash. That person was not taking digital payments. And this is an 80-year-old woman who's probably not as tech savvy as we are, but she has grown to recognize the potential of technology. Which brings me to the last point, which is motivation. And what I mean by motivation, I mean, have we shown enough proof points to citizens that yes, this may indeed work? This will work, and this will work as efficiently, as well, or even better than physical transactions, than physical systems. And that is where COVID vaccination helped India. In our vaccination certificates, we had QR code. So you could, those were not only digitally signed, but verifiable vaccination certificates. And that became the first digital health record that we had for almost 1 billion people that was available to all the citizens, irrespective of whether they're digital literate or not. So to answer your question, Heba, it's essentially 3 things. Access. Are we providing them with access? It's not just access to connectivity, internet, but also access to user-centric solutions that keep in mind their diversity, that keep in mind various needs that they may have. Second, skills. Skills, are we making them digitally empowered? It's not about just digital inclusion, but empowering them to use it creatively, imaginatively, proactively, and build on it. And the third bit is motivation. Are we designing solutions enough that will convince them that yes, this works and this works better? So I think that is what I think are the key barriers that we faced, and we solved for it.
Thank you so much, Titi. Arvind, I saw you wanted to come in on.
I just, I know we've probably exceeded our time for the first round, but I will add to what Yukti said and what Inyasi said. It's in a very important experiment that we did. Thanks to ORF, we had taken about 45 country delegates to one of the oldest living cities in the world, where I happened to teach a class, a city called Varanasi in India. And this is the live example of what everybody has said, so I just should explain that. So there is a small tea vendor there who sells 2 samosas. Everybody knows samosas here? Anybody? These are small Indian, snacks basically that you eat with tea. You're not supposed to eat them too much. There's a lot of carbs in them. But any case, it's a very favorite thing to have in a college campus. 1 tea, 2 samosas is about 12 rupees, 15 cents. And this shopkeeper, who has been there since when I used to be a student in that college for 30 years, and I asked him, I said, till last time you were not accepting digital payment. Today you are taking this QR code payment as Yukti was explaining. And he said, I've learned something. It's very good. I can take the payment. And there is a scan that she was explaining the QR code. And the speaker keeps saying, money received, money received. But he said 2 things which were really enlightening. And one was, what Inyasi mentioned. If you are ending up paying some percentage of the fees in credit cards or debit card transactions, that 5 to 10% margin that these shopkeepers have, half of them is gone. It's, let's say, just to make it a number, 100 rupee transaction, and you're paying 2% to just do the transaction, their margin is about 5 rupees or 6 rupees. They've just lost 1/3 to 50% of their margin. So that was the first motivation not to do it. What system that Yukti explained is the India's UPI system, the payment system is 0 cost, both to me as well as to the retailer. So he gets his whole 12 rupees or the 100 rupees, whatever is transferred. That was the first motivation. And the second motivation, he said, I can price at whatever point I want to price. This is an economic lesson coming from a shopkeeper in India. And he explained this very well. He said, I can price it at 12 rupees. It is neither expensive or less. If I was making it 10 rupees, I'm going to lose money. If I was going to make it 15 rupees, the students are going to lose money. So now I can price 12 rupees and receive the 12 rupees digitally with a lot of efficiencies. I don't have to give change back to anybody. So his motivation of buying that smartphone with a QR code was primarily efficiency, getting efficiency in processing more transactions, getting efficiency in managing his profit margins, and really ensuring that empowerment that comes with it. So these are practical things that how people have adopted, and he's one of the 1 billion who has joined the internet just in the last 6 months. So.
Thank you, Arvind. So, Ines, I want to turn to you now. I was, prying on your LinkedIn profile, and I found a very interesting statement you have there. You said, nothing more rewarding than a repeat consumer. That is the why to consumer fit approach. So tell us a little bit about that. I know that, we recently saw the Findex data. The Findex is this global indicator that measures access to financial services. And there they said that there are key necessary things for achieving financial inclusion: intentional policy making and inclusive product design. So tell us a little bit more about your statement on your LinkedIn and what you do with your company to achieve that.
Yeah, thank you very much. As I said, when we were starting, it was clear, the problem was clear, but as an entrepreneur, you always have to solve it with minimum resources, which means the best way to approach it is should be as less cost as possible. So what we realized, when you're solving one problem, sometimes for you to effectively solve it, you need to tick a couple of boxes, not just one box, right? So what we realize is we do have some infrastructures, but the costs, at what cost? It's very expensive. And we have technology, yes, but is it accessible to the intended market or to the market that we should be actually solving the most important need? And it was not accessible to all of them. It was accessible to a specific portion of people, which is less than 10%. And by designing this product, what we wanted to do was, as my colleague here said, it's very important that there is an acknowledgement in a language they understand. So the speaker solves that problem amazingly, right? Because it gives a little bit of trust to this person who doesn't have these digital, elite digital capabilities. So what we do here, especially in African countries, we realize that messages, pop-up messages are amazing, but they have to be instant. If there is a glitch or a delay, then you have a problem, because you have to live there when they've already confirmed the transaction. So what we try to do is, how can we bring this solution to this multitude of people in a language that they really understand? And the problem was, now moving from e-commerce, we switched and we became a wallet, and now we came under the radar of the central bank. And then, do we have the regulation that regulates a company that's so young? Because only banks get licenses. And then the Rwandan government has been doing tremendous strides to create different facilities. We have a sandbox where you can come and then test, pilot, and until you are fully fit to qualify for a license. So shouldn't we have that? Because we have a couple of sandboxes across Africa, but we have 54 African countries. So all of them, they don't have that particular facility. So, and the banks were not willing to solve that particular problem, right? And what we did is, the infrastructure, we saw an opening in the infrastructure side because the policymakers are willing to do so. And what we did is to take all the existing solution out there and then make sure that we are repackaging it and then reselling it to put it at an effective service of our target market.
That's a very important point. Is that it's this the intentional policy making combined with private sector innovation and willingness to take a risk and understand the consumer is a key point. So I want to make sure we get audience questions. At the same time, we haven't finished our conversation. So why don't you, if you have a question, start going to the mic, and I will turn to you, Arvin. We talked a little bit about the question of trust before we joined the panel. How do you think we can, the last mile, the 2.7 billion left are probably the least prepared. And you talked about motivation and their willingness to join. How do we cultivate trust to encourage inclusion and resolve the problem of exclusion?
I think one of the answers lies in one of the themes of this panel is a digital public infrastructure. Infrastructure that is freely, openly available to society, to governments, to startups, to businesses, equally, openly, and non-rent-seeking manner. Two, it has to be backed by policy and regulation with the right checks and balances. Three, it has to have the right user experience. I mean, you have to create the need. And to get more and more people included, I think the challenge will be on what rails, on what digital infrastructure are you riding. I'll give you one example, yeah, and I use the word very carefully, non-rent seeking. It need not be free, can be non-rent seeking. It can be, because it has to be sustainable also. Not all things free are always good. So, Facebook in India launched a campaign called Free Basics, and it was supposed to be free internet. We actually didn't take it. And the reason for that was it was coming with a lot of strings and bells and whistles, which we didn't want. So I think it's the digital public infrastructure approach that has been implemented at a population which is as diverse as India, at a scale which is population scale, 1.4 billion people, is one of the models. It's not the only model, it's one of the models.
Thank you. My name is Ricardo. I'm the CEO of IDARE, the International Digital Health and Artificial Intelligence Research Collaborative based in Geneva. And I'm also the founder and president of Unite, which is a network of current and former policymakers from 97 countries, focusing also on global health. And this session is on equity and access to digital infrastructure. And recently speaking in, I won't mention the country, but a European high-income country, along with, in a room like this with a lot of people, we were discussing the potential of harnessing the power of digital towards achieving better health outcomes and more equity within our health systems. And after an hour-long discussion, the main person in the room, who is the payer, the decision maker, stood up and he said, I don't believe in digital. So sometimes it's even more than just trust. We're still at the point where we have a problem of belief. Even with all of the case studies, even demonstrating the power of artificial intelligence and digital health in this case. And so it's becoming clearer as we work around the world that actually bad leadership, bad politicians can actually lead to a widening of the gap with the rise of AI instead of closing the gap using the potential of digital. India has been taking the lead through G20, but we need to continue to have G20, G7, and other multilateral organisms moving this agenda forward. And I'd like to hear your opinions on how we ensure that we fix not only the trust problem, but also the belief problem that is underlying and undermining many of the political decisions being made around the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Who would like to take the...
Well, I think this is not only a political problem, it's a social problem. And I think for me, it's more important that digital economy should not pulverize time and not require to live the constant frustration of impossible demand of multitasks. I think that. And I need, I think, is reinforce community and the political commons in the different ways of cooperatives, especially in the human labor. I think it's the very, very important digital economy go to the way. I don't know if I answer, but I think this is very important.
So
I can give a brief thing on this. India has, during its diplomacy, the G20 presidency has led a campaign called Data for Development. And that has been the model that India has said that we need to use data means technology for development. And that is a very different model that the world has seen before. It's societal technology. And I think that message, at least in the year of the presidency, has resonated with the global leadership. And I think we need to just keep working on it. It came at the right time, the right place, and the right leader, at least from leadership from India, has talked about it at all forums available in the world. But to last point of yours, of the belief of the leadership, I think that's essential. If the leadership does not get the vision, whether it's the national leadership or a state leadership or a city leadership, the vision has to be led by the leadership, and a lot of change, like any CEO of any company or any nation, it has to be led by the CEO. So there is no doubt about that.
yes, you want to comment?
Yes, if I may comment on that, I believe The human race is an amazing race, right? So we solve problems, but in our wake, we create a lot of problems as well. So it's right now, in the last couple of years, the problem has been how do we get included digitally? And as of now, we have also a problem of climate change that's looking very, very bad, that we will have at some point also could create specific measures. But in my experience in the private sector, I believe always that we have to listen to the customer, because at the end of the day, this is the guy we're serving. It's not so long ago that there was a health clinic and there was also a mobile device. But today, everybody, a couple of people here are wearing a watch that's probably recording your pulse rate and probably giving you some suggestions. So it shows you how long we've come. And because the consumer, because you're always after perfectioning what you're doing, providing better experience, I believe it's in our ability to keep on innovating. And I guess there are some technologies that already now, if people were reluctant to be convinced by the reach of the technology, at least some people are now seeing what it can do. It's more than what other people want. I think everybody wants to be healthy. So at some point, if you need to be healthy, you will need to have a watch for that sake. So I believe that also slowly it's going to change. The evolution of technology is going to change in that regard.
Yutki, maybe we can take the next question and then you can be first to respond. Please.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm Dr. Haroun Wannes from Tunisia. I got an MBA from Sorbonne University and I manage a startup incubator in Tunisia. I have been to India and I tested the QR code to buy bananas. And 2 days ago, I'm still in Rwanda and I tested the Momo application, the Momo mobile banking to give a tip to motorcycle. So I'm very surprised because I see that everyone in India or Rwanda are using financial solutions in order to live a normal life and to be very, very easy in dealing with anything, with commerce, with anything. So do you think that the Momo is the basic version of the QR code that we are seeing in Rwanda, in India? And is there any solution, international solution for access to finance to other countries? In my country, for example, Tunisia, we are struggling to access to financial access. We have internet, we have smartphones, but with that being said, we are struggling to do that. Is there any international solution or each country had to have its own and specific solution? Thank you.
Okay. So, you had a comment on the previous question, so you want to start with that, and if you have a response or a comment on this, the last question.
So I'll probably zoom out a bit and start with this.
Just to say, we have 1 minute, 30,
Yeah.
so it will have to be a rapid fire response.
Okay, yeah. So digitization can happen in 2 ways. A, you design solutions, you design an economy that's solution-centric, or you build building blocks that enable others to design solutions. Now, India built these building blocks, and that's digital public infrastructure we keep talking about. These are digital rails that can unlock market innovation and can enable others to design solutions, right? So when we think about digital public infrastructure, it essentially enables the market to come up with frugal innovation. Now, coming to your question, sir, when we talk about digital public infrastructure, the idea is that digital public infrastructure should be underpinned by digital public goods. That can be open source, that can be community driven. And I would like to take a small example, just a 1 minute segue into the work that we are doing in Gambia. So after doing the work that we have been doing in India, we started working in Gambia, but our approach was to build a local task force that will design context-specific solutions for Gambian problems. Now, that's when we started with the cohort and we started working with students. And one of the team leader of those students is here with us. That's Geneba, and she has been working with the community, not only to understand the problems that they're facing, but also understanding a DPI-based ecosystem, also to understand DPI level of thinking and designing these solutions for the country. Now, these are open source solutions. We have been, so the UPI bit, the payments bit that you also experienced while you were buying bananas, that is, there's an underlying layer that is a protocol-centric ecosystem. Protocol essentially brings in interoperability that enables different platforms to talk to each other. So now, this is available to any and every country in the world, right? This is not a proprietary technology, and that is what Gambia is doing. We are now thinking of designing solutions, and for all you know, Geneba is leading the way. She is understanding the challenges that exist in mobility ecosystem, in skills and skilling and education ecosystem, in health, so on and so forth, and designing solution using Beacon Protocol. That is not India's proprietary technology. So you can use this. And we are thinking of building Open Gambia Network, which will essentially bring in a lot of low-cost innovations that are solving solutions for the problems that Gambia faces. Now imagine if Open Gambia goes live. Rwanda can probably build an open Rwandan network that essentially focuses on solving 4 challenges specific to Rwanda. Senegal can come and do that. This will not only, building these open networks across countries, across West Africa, will not only solve for their individual challenges, but if they are built using a protocol thinking, using a DPI thinking, it will essentially bring in interoperability within these systems. So imagine tomorrow if Geneba were to apply for a job in Senegal. She lives in Banjul. She can very well apply to that job. If she's a provider, she is a provider of, let's just say, dresses in Banjul. A woman named Yara sitting in Rwanda can possibly transact with her, right? So thinking of protocol-based system, thinking of DPIs, thinking of designing solutions contextual to the geography we're targeting in can probably help us, probably help you, and we can probably have an open digital zone across Africa wherein you can not only transact, not only enable flow of goods, services, but also human capital. And I think that was just a mixture of a lot of observations that I've had and the questions that I heard. I hope that does help. And I hope Tunisia also probably thinks about setting up digital public infrastructure and probably building a service layer on top of it using protocols. And voila, you have an open network where everyone has equitable access. It's inclusive to all the services across sectors.
Thank you, Yutki. So I think we're over time, something I do not like to do. So, but I think, Yutki, you brought us home, so I don't think we need to go through the panel. Thank you very much for your attention. And looking forward to the next.